So a lot to get to this morning, Joe. A lot of different stories, all kind of going back to somebody who might be melting down just a tiny bit.
There is no doubt that the president, who has had some rough times in the White House, is now facing perhaps his toughest run. The reports coming out of the White House all suggest it's a president who is growing increasingly disinterested in his job, increasingly angry. We've got Philip Rucker here. We're going to be talking to him in a minute about it. But Willie, none of the portraits are flattering, of course, of the president, but also not comforting to Americans and people around the world who understand that the president of the United States is one of the key figures in global politics, and right now he seems to be checked out.
Yeah, we'll have all this reporting from Philip Rucker and Carol Lee here at NBC News about sort of the state of mind of the president and what's going on in the White House right now. But it supports, I think, what you've heard and what a lot of us are hearing, is that because of the Mueller investigation, because of the midterm elections, which day by day continue to get worse for Republicans, the president is isolated, perhaps even depressed about what's happening. And don't forget now, we learned yesterday that he is filling out written questions from Bob Mueller. So he is getting in the thick of the Mueller investigation, realizing what's being asked of him there, and also dealing with the fact that he's going to have a Democratic House that's going to be coming for him in January. It all adds up to a very isolated president of the United States upstairs in the West Wing.
Well, you know, Willie, before we're going to get to that in 1 second, just something that I read on your Twitter feed last night, and was reading it while I was reading a Lupica book to Jack for his good night. Because, you know, we have Twitter tickers in all of my children's rooms.
That's a big
so
red.
weird.
And yours flashes.
The kids. Yeah.
Right? So I'm reading, you know, this Lupica book with Jack, and starts flashing on your Twitter feed. I also sometimes we have an alarm going off when it comes.
Wow.
Wakes the kids
That's
up.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But I want them to read every tweet. Fire drill. And last night's fire drill was, so you are at a place where, one of our favorite places, PJ Clark's, right? Mm-hmm. And you're at PJ Clark's, and you're with veterans, and Nikki Haley hears that there's some vets in the building. And what does she do?
Yeah, so PJ Clark's is so generous, throws a dinner with us for Operation Mend, which is a group that treats the country's most severely wounded vets out of UCLA Medical Center out west. So they're all in town for Veterans Day. Every year we have this big dinner with them. And downstairs, Nikki Haley and her family happen to be eating dinner. Someone lets her know that there's a group of veterans upstairs. She gets up from her table downstairs, comes upstairs, and spends a bunch of time with these men and women and gets to know the group. So I just, you know what, we got so much ugliness in politics. I decided, you know, put it up on Twitter and let people know that as cynical and ugly as politics can be sometimes, and oftentimes, in fact, politicians do good things and do the right thing.
And I'll tell you what, Mika, that means the world for Nikki Haley, UN ambassador, somebody that they know well. I mean, for somebody to spend time with them, she could have very easily stayed down there with her family. I'm sure, you know, it's tough to grab family time when you're there, too. So it wasn't an easy thing to do, but great to come up and recognize the extraordinarily difficult thing that those men and women have been doing for this country. So, yeah, that's a real class act.
Yeah, they appreciated it.
So let's start with what could be the source of all this concern in the White House. We begin with the Democratic wave that still continues to grow
every night.
Yeah.
And you know, we got hammered for not congratulating somebody for winning.
Oh, right. Well,
yeah, right. The morning after, looks like, yikes.
There was that.
May end up losing.
No worries with that. But that will help explain, though, the president's mood. And we're going to break it all down in just a moment. In Arizona, the Democrats' flip of a Republican Senate seat in that state marked a major shift for another reason. As the New York Times notes, Democrats now hold 6 seats in the state's congressional delegation, and the Republicans 5. The Democrats have not had a majority in the Arizona delegation since the 1960s. And the current ballot count in California makes it appear as if Republicans will be left with only 8 seats in that state's 55-member federal delegation next year, as Democrat Katie Porter, championed by progressives in the GOP stronghold of Orange County, took the lead from Republican Congresswoman Mimi Walters. This as Republican Young Kim's lead has dwindled to 711 votes over Democrat Gil Cisneros in the race to succeed 12-term incumbent Ed Royce. The Cook Political Report's Dave Wasserman tweeted, quote, "It's only a matter of time before he takes the lead," looking like another Republican loss.
Mike Barnicle, you look state after state, Nevada, Arizona, again, 2 states with quite a few Hispanics there. And there is no doubt that what the president was considering great strategy to bring out his base, with, this stupid caravan conspiracy theory, which he hasn't talked about since Election Day, which Fox News barely touches on.
What's going on?
It ends up, that's devastating there. But, I mean, let's look back. The House, bigger losses for Republicans than any time since Watergate. The Senate, they had every structural advantage. You're going to end up picking up maybe 2, which they should have picked up 5, 6, 7, 8. And then you go to Arizona. Democrats haven't been in control had a majority there in the congressional delegation since the 1960s. Mike, they haven't had. I mean, that is so long ago. That's when you get your first AARP card. So it's been a long time.
Well before that, Joe. Well before that.
Oh my God!
Thank you very much for reminding me of that. Reminding people of that. That's very nice of you.
Yes,
but you know what's interesting?
I'm getting mine in a week. Yeah, but
what's
anyway,
really interesting about it is that we were clearly very premature in a lot of the election calls. A week ago. Campaigns are really important. All of these are individual victories rather than party victories. They become party victories. But the campaigns that were run by the Democrats in these Republican districts were all to a campaign very interested in that they focused on local issues, a lot of them, that they didn't vilify Trump so much as they vilified what was happening to the country around us and to the services that people expect for Congress to provide, to the Congress people to fight for on behalf of their constituents. In both Arizona and California, Arizona I think much more so than California, you can see the color of the state changing. I mean, it's gone from red to a sort of a blend of purple, and now in the next cycle, I think it's going to be Democratic. But California, the numbers in California that just recounted are incredible. That we would have going into the next Congress, 8 members of the delegation would be Republican. I think that was the number. Only 8 in a state as huge as California. That's astounding.
Yeah, it really is. And Susan Page, so many of the Democrats that are talking now were saying, hey, we didn't have to talk about Donald Trump. We didn't have to talk about his racism. Our voters saw that every day on TV. So we could talk about health care. We could talk about traffic in the suburbs. We could talk about local issues. And so we got our positive messages out. And Donald Trump did the rest of the work for us by turning off, college-educated women and college-educated men by delivering this blatantly racist message about Hispanics. It really blew up in his face.
Democrats, especially in these House races, were so disciplined in focusing on health care. A majority of the ads that Democrats aired in House races across the country dealt with the issue of health care, not with the issue of President Trump. And I think Democrats are looking at this for some signals, some lessons learned for the 2020 presidential race. How do you run against President Trump? Do you try to focus on his provocative rhetoric, or do you focus on the issues that really affect people when they're sitting home around the kitchen table thinking about sending their kids to college or making sure that they've got health coverage? So I think that is one of the things that Democrats think a lesson they can draw from the success that they've had. This was a very successful election for Democrats, especially in these House races and in some of these governor's races as well.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.